is also sharing some books to help out with his studies. And so we appreciate your contributions. Bring some what? Like supplements? Yes, there are some supplements. Okay, so. Okay, that looks like it's pretty much it. I would like to mention that this seminar has required a little bit of expense. And I would like to take up an offering before we have our presentation. And so I'd like to ask our deacons if they could pick up that offering, please. And Professor Martin is going to share with us a special music. So we appreciate your contributions. Deacons, if you can help us out with that. Thank you. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the wonderful presentations that we have received until now. And now as we have our last presentation, once again, we invite your Spirit to be present, to speak through Dr. Medley to each one of our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, share with us, Dr. Medley.
So nutrition in the brain is going to be our topic for this hour. And nutrition is possibly the most overlooked cause of diminished mental power, and it can have profound effects. Once a nutrition change is adopted, it takes 7 to 10 days to begin noticing a difference. One of the reasons why our program is a 10-day program is we're already starting to notice the difference before the program is over with. But gradual improvement will continue and peak at 3 to 6 months. So it's one of the reasons why it's important when we talk about re-entry of being able to continue on this. We've had a few patients sabotage themselves in the Sacramento airport at McDonald's after being there for 10 days, and they've experienced benefit enough to be able to go home, and they're doing better, and then they think, wow, a hamburger, I hadn't even thought about that in 10 days, and that looks pretty good. And now they've sabotaged their continual improvement that would have continued to get better. So that's why we prepare them during that last weekend for a lot of re-entry things so that they can continue to have improvement even at the 20-week point. So insufficient dietary tryptophan is one of the reasons for depression. And of course, dietary tryptophan may not be brain tryptophan. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's not just getting tryptophan in the bloodstream, we need to get it into the brain. Once it's in the brain, it can be converted to serotonin, melatonin, and niacin, but it's the least abundant amino acid in the diet, and the conversion of tryptophan to 5-HTP is inhibited by stress. This conversion takes place in the brain, but if you are not coping adequately with stress, you won't make as much serotonin. We have had individuals come to our program and tell us, Dr. Medley, I'm here for my brain chemistry issues, and I know you're the brain biochemical expert, but I don't need to go to counseling because my problems are real. If we are able to, and often it takes a reframing of our thoughts to raise our frustration tolerance. One of the issues that is very present in a lot of humanity today is called low frustration tolerance. We call it LFTs. And they're not able to tolerate the usual nuisances of life. And that will actually inhibit their serotonin production in their own brain. And that means that they're going to even be more irritable as a result. So it's a combined approach, the biochemical approach plus the cognitive approach that produces the benefit. Insulin resistance will also inhibit that. What's another name for insulin resistance? Diabetes. Can you have insulin resistance without diabetes? What is that called? That's called prediabetes or metabolic syndrome. What's one of the best therapies for helping insulin resistance? Physical exercise, that's right. Brisk walking. Other forms of cardio exercise can help. Of course, lowering your sugar intake. If you're overweight, losing weight. Magnesium deficiency can cause lack of serotonin, as can a B6 deficiency and lack of light. We need light through the eyes to start that serotonin production. And of course, increasing age. You know, back before the era of modern technology, depression was almost unheard of in younger age groups. In fact, the term for it in the lay world was the midlife crisis, because it didn't happen until you were middle-aged or beyond. And it is more trouble making those neurotransmitters when we get older. But if you're on a very good program, you'll be able to make them even in elderly age. But it is more of a challenge. By the way, the biggest rates of depression now are under the age of 25, you know. It's huge rates of depression among our teenage population and our 20-year-old population. So tryptophan improves premenstrual dysphoria from ovulation to the 3rd day of menstruation. It improves depression and seasonal affective disorder, insomnia. It even improves sleep apnea. A lot of people know about the CPAP mask. I find less people know about weight loss. If you get down to your lean body mass, 80% of sleep apnea goes away. I mean, it'll just completely go away. You don't need your CPAP mask or things like that. But a lot of people are unaware that tryptophan will improve your sleep apnea. And that's through that mechanism of being able to make serotonin. And it also improves nicotine withdrawal. We have many addicts come to our program. Can't remember having a program where we don't have a nicotine addict. Usually several in the program. A lot of them younger kids now, vaping, you know. Vaping is highly addictive. But they're amazed at how easy it is when they come to our program to overcome their addictions. And the temptation is, it was so easy here that if I go back to it, I know I'll be able to quit it again. But we have to warn them, no, it's not going to be easy to do this at home. We're doing things diet-wise to improve their serotonin levels. We're giving them the hydro. We're giving them all of these things that are going to be beneficial, and they're not going to have that, all that comprehensive approach at home. And therefore, if they get back on it again, it's very tough on them again. But the withdrawal is very easy. You know, we had an individual, in fact, some of the really hard stuff. We had a girl come to our program, young mother. She had like 4 kids, and she was on 2 milligrams of Xanax 4 times a day. For those in the medical profession, that's a huge amount of benzos. Highly addicted. And part of the reason why she was taking this was because of her marriage. She was married to a guy who was a go-getter, and he was making a lot of money out there as a business person, but he kept her undercover. He wouldn't let her have a phone. He wouldn't let her have all of this stuff. She had to be home taking care of the kids as he was out and about, and unfortunately, she found out he wasn't even faithful to her, etc. And so to cope with all of this, but not get out of the money situation, she started to take Xanax. And the psychiatrist kept upping the dose and upping the dose. So she comes to our program. Her husband actually brings her and says, yeah, we're having issues, but it's her mental health issues. And he was going to turn around and leave her with us. And myself and the therapist had a meeting with him apart from her and said, you go home, you lose your wife. You need this program as much as she does. And says, oh, well, you know, my business, you know, I can't. I've got to do all this. I said, it's far more expensive to undergo a divorce than to lose whatever business you're going to lose in the 10 days. And he finally figured it out with that, and so he ended up staying. But as a result of what happened, she got off of the 2 milligrams of Xanax 4 times a day to no benzos at the time that she left. And we followed up with her just last week, actually. And no, she has not returned to the benzos. and we're still working with both of them. We have what's called an extended support program where we follow up with them for 20 weeks, including redoing their blood tests and making sure we're getting all of those biochemical things perfected and continue with the therapy. So it's not just 10 days and done. We follow them to make sure that they're going to do very well the rest of their life. But the point is that good nutrition can help you to overcome even tough addictions. So what foods are high in tryptophan? When I was in medical school, I was told that whole milk was a great source of tryptophan. You can see it's not a bad source, 46 milligrams per 100 grams. But black-eyed peas, walnuts, almonds, sesame seeds, gluten. By the way, a lot of people are against gluten and wheat, but unless you have a sensitivity to wheat, whole wheat is good for you. Now, refined wheat is not so good. In fact, it's probably better not to eat than to eat white flour. But whole grains are very healthy for you. They actually can help your serotonin production. They can help you methylate. It's a very good food. I don't think Christ would have called himself the bread of life if bread was harmful. And we get this idea that people need to stay away from bread. Not true. Gluten is very high in tryptophan. And gluten is that particular protein aspect of wheat flour. And by the way, sometimes after giving this lecture, I've had follow-up. I just gave this lecture not too long ago in Brazil, and there was a Brazilian family that had read this book called Wheat Belly and gave up all of their wheat 4 years earlier. And the woman looked like a skeleton, and so did the man, and they were not looking healthy at all. And after my lecture, the wife went home and baked bread, and the next day, the whole family was smiling, saying, wow, we are so glad to hear that bread was healthy, and we felt so good after eating that. And part of it, they probably made more serotonin as a result of the tryptophan that was there in wheat. Pumpkin seeds are also a good source. You might wonder, roasted versus raw. Raw is a pretty good source too, but we put the source that was higher, which is roasted pumpkin seeds. And tofu's off the chart there. That's 747 milligrams. One of the Asian advantages is high in tryptophan. But it's not just tryptophan. We want to get the right ratio to the 5 amino acids. There's called 6 large neutral amino acids that compete for the same carrier to get tryptophan across the blood-brain barrier. Tryptophan does not diffuse across it. It has to be carried across. And milk has 40% tryptophan, 60% of the competitors. And so does salmon, 40%, 60%. But which one do you think will get more tryptophan into the brain? Milk or salmon? Many people are saying salmon. Actually, it's milk. Salmon will not get the tryptophan into the brain. There's another mechanism that's very important to understand. We need carbohydrates with the tryptophan to get it to cross the blood-brain barrier because it's an insulin-mediated mechanism. And so salmon is high in protein, high in fat, but it's carbohydrate deficient. The tryptophan will end up in your muscles, but not in your brain. And so we want the tryptophan to end up in the brain, and milk has a lot of carbs in it. And so those carbs actually help tryptophan to get into the brain. One of the reasons why I was told in medical school, get your tryptophan from milk. Beef, chicken, and brown rice have even better ratios. Which one do you think could get more tryptophan into the brain? Brown rice, because you have the carbs. Black-eyed peas are higher yet. Soybeans, higher yet. Black walnuts, higher yet. Pumpkin seeds, higher yet. Tofu is higher yet. Almonds, one of the best sources of food for getting tryptophan into the brain, but there's one that's higher than almonds, and that's sesame seeds. I noticed the hummus there in the potluck today, and I made sure that I got hummus to be able to get that high tryptophan. What is hummus made out of? Sesame seed butter and garbanzos or chickpeas. In stress-prone subjects, notice this is a direct quote from the research, high-carb, low-protein food, it doesn't say deficient in protein, but lower in protein, prevents a deterioration of mood and performance under uncontrollable laboratory stress conditions. Stress-prone subjects have a higher risk of brain serotonin deficiency. In such subjects, higher natural carbs increase personal control. A lot of people are really surprised when they come to our program and find all these nice, tasty, natural carbs. And I thought all carbs were bad for you. You know, they're used to the ketosis diet and thinking they have to get rid of all carbs. There are good carbs and there are bad carbs. Just like there's good fats and there's bad fats. We don't throw it all out. And the natural carbs will increase what? Personal control. Remember we talked about managing your emotions, self-control. So nutrition does play a role in regards to our emotional intelligence and being able to have personal control under stress. Carbohydrates prevent a functional shortage of central serotonin during acute stress due to their potentiating effect on brain tryptophan. Another important neurotransmitter is called tyrosine. Tyrosine is incorporated into proteins of all life forms and is a precursor for the synthesis of thyroxine. What is thyroxine? It's thyroid hormone. Thyroid is good for our metabolism, good for our brain, good for our alertness. It's a precursor for the synthesis of also melanin, enkephalins, and two neurotransmitters. What are those neurotransmitters? Dopamine and norepinephrine. Now, yesterday I went into serotonin, so I won't talk about its effects as much, but I didn't mention dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine is going to help you particularly with what? It can help you feeling good, but even more important than feeling good, it'll help you with motivation. So proper motivation and interest in life. If you wake up in the morning and you're not excited about the day, that's a dopamine problem. Or, you know, I would say some of you probably don't have as much dopamine problems as the ones who left in between lectures, because the ones who left in between lectures didn't have the healthy motivation to stay and learn, and so there could have been some dopamine issues. We'll even look at our audience that comes to our depression and anxiety recovery program. We had one gentleman that worked in a BMW mechanic shop, and he had some significant mental health issues. He was still working as a BMW mechanic, but I knew right away he did not have a dopamine issue. Why did I know that? Because he would come and sit on the front row before that lecture started every time, and he would talk about, these lectures are just amazing. I have aha moments on every one of these lectures that are life-changing, that are so positive. And he says, I'm not going to miss any of those lectures. And I realize we don't need to help this boy's dopamine. He's got the healthy motivation to be there. I'm much more concerned about the kids or any adult who is not coming and showing up late, and then we're trying to have to find them. Because we have a staff that keeps people accountable. We realize the program isn't going to work unless you work the program. And so if they're not there where they need to be, if they're not at their hydrotherapy appointment on time, if they're not at their therapist appointment on time, if they're not at their lecture on time, those are the dopamine problem patients. And those are ones that we're going to particularly have to work on trying to get their dopamine levels better. So dopamine is going to help you with motivation, enjoying the usual activities of life, and what is norepinephrine going to help you with? Norepinephrine is a cousin of adrenaline. Adrenaline is called epinephrine. So that gives you a clue. It's going to help you with energy. It's going to help you get rid of your fatigue. It's going to help you with endurance, and it's also going to help you with focus, to be able to stay focused. Tyrosine is also a potent antioxidant and stimulates growth hormone production. It's of therapeutic benefit in improving depression, high blood pressure. By the way, interestingly, how the world gets you to get more norepinephrine activity is by blocking those norepinephrine reuptake channels. We talked about that yesterday. And when we block those norepinephrine reuptaking channels, yes, it can give you more energy. It can help you with your fatigue. It might help you with your depression by doing that. But it's going to raise your blood pressure. And so it can cause hypertension. But when we take care of the underlying issue, which is not enough tyrosine in the brain to make the norepinephrine, then the blood pressure actually goes down to normal. And so we can help high blood pressure through tyrosine. It also helps with stress, cognitive function. Notice it helps with memory, Parkinson's disease, PKU, and narcolepsy. Looking around the room to see if I see anyone with narcolepsy. What is narcolepsy? That's when you want to stay awake, but you can't. You're falling asleep, and it's not even nighttime. And so often this is L-tyrosine that you might be lacking. By the way, speaking of Parkinson's disease, we had a patient that had advanced Parkinson's disease that our screeners turned down for coming to the program. She was referred because of her severe depression. She was in the Baltimore area, and her husband kept calling, saying, why can't she be in the program? And after about the third time, he says, I think Dr. Medley would have more mercy. Make sure you run her case by Dr. Medley. And the screeners ran it by me, and I said, no, we can't take her. We only have 20 seats per program. So we want to be able to take the people that can utilize the material and engage in that material. And she couldn't feed herself. She couldn't dress herself. We also don't have 24/7 care. And so I reminded the screener of that. You know, we don't have 24/7 care. Well, he took advantage of that and says, I will feed her. I will dress her. I will do all these things for her. Please let her into the program. And then on Monday, before the program started, her neurologist calls me from Johns Hopkins and says, Dr. Medley, please let my patient into your program. And I said, you know, she's got advanced Parkinson's. And he says, I know, I'm her Parkinson's doctor, and I'm treating that. I'm not asking you to treat the Parkinson's, but she has severe depression, and I know she'd be helped a lot by going through your program. So since I got a call from her neurologist, I told my screeners, all right, if anyone cancels, let her in first, put her to the top of the list. And someone canceled on Thursday. It often happens. And so she got on that next flight as the program was starting, and it happened so quickly, the staff at Weimar didn't realize it. And so they're freaking out as this man wheels her onto campus with this wheelchair, and she's obviously very dependent, and they're saying, we don't have 24/7 care. And so I got a knock on the door, and I said, well, we'll see her next. I wanted to make sure, because she's not actually accepted into the program till that first visit. And so on that first visit, I was wanting to see if he would say the same thing. And he said, yep, I will feed her, I will dress her, I will do all of this. I'm here for her. Thank you for letting her into this program. And so I talked to her, since she was having problems making dopamine. Parkinson's disease is a disease of toxicity where your brainstem can't make dopamine. And so I said, I'm going to put you on L-tyrosine supplements. Let's put you on 2,000 milligrams 3 times a day. Let's start the first dose now so that you can, at least the cells that can make dopamine, we can get them making more dopamine. So she took 2,000 milligrams at night. She took 2,000 milligrams in the morning. We put her in the bottom floor of the inn where there's no stairs. You can just have a wheelchair go up to the cafeteria. And her husband, who dressed her, was getting her ready for her first breakfast meal on Friday morning. And as he wheels her outside the door, she says, honey, put those brakes on the wheelchair. And it was actually uphill. For those of you familiar with Weimar, from the bottom floor of the inn to go to the New Start cafeteria, it's a hike uphill. And so she starts getting out of her wheelchair. And he says, no, honey, don't do that. You're going to fall. She says, get out of my way. And she starts walking on her own to the cafeteria. And yes, we didn't cure her Parkinson's, but we were able to help it just nutritionally by getting more of the substrate needed to be able to make the dopamine. And they send us a thank you note every year in regards to the turnaround that occurred in her life as a result of coming to the Weimar program. Tyrosine supplementation in response to stress. Those given tyrosine had significantly reduced headache, stress, fatigue, muscle aches, and sleepiness compared to controls. Improvements were noted in mood and mental states, cognitive tests, math skills, coding, map, compass, pattern recognition in the tyrosine group. Feelings of vigor and improvements in blood pressure also occurred. Notice there's different foods that are high in tyrosine. You see your greens showing up. Mustard greens, lamb's quarters. Do you know what lamb's quarters are? Here in California, it's not the hind leg of a small sheep. What is it? It's a green. Yeah, it's actually a weed, but it's a very tender green. Whenever Erica finds it in the garden, she allows that to grow. It's actually the highest green in calcium on the planet. And so it's high in calcium and also high in tyrosine. Tomatoes are good sources. Tofu is a pretty good source, but there's a type of soy that's even higher. What is it called? Edamame. Edamame are your green soybeans. Green soybeans are much higher in omega-3, so we have that available there for our lunchtime salad. Almonds are high in it, oats, sunflower seeds. Peanuts are actually a pretty good source of tyrosine, but pumpkin and squash seeds tie for the highest in tyrosine. And notice the advantage of pumpkin seeds, they were also high in tryptophan. So we have pumpkin seeds available at breakfast, we have pumpkin seeds available at lunch, we have pumpkin seeds if you're eating the third meal of the day as well to help out those, the production of those neurotransmitters. But notice tyrosine also has competition to get in the brain. And if we look at the top sources here, you see flax and chia. This is why we don't just recommend the flax oil. The flax, ground flax itself will have tryptophan and tyrosine. But there's foods higher than pumpkin seeds to get it into the brain. Soybeans, but notice at the top, watermelon and mustard greens. So how does this come into play? We had a trucker come through our program from Texas. He worked for an oil company that made parts to drill oil wells. And there might be a oil drilling going on in Albuquerque, and a part that they need goes bad and cracks, and they have 100 men out there on the job, and they're realizing these 100 men are going to get paid for another couple of days while we're waiting for a part. So how do they help that situation? They knock on his shoulder and say, you need to drive all night to get that part over there to them. And he had anxiety. And so our program is a caffeine-free program because caffeine and anxiety don't go well together. Neither does caffeine or depression. And he says, Doc, how am I going to keep my job? Sometimes I don't hear till 4 o'clock in the afternoon I have to deliver this part. I said, once you're off of caffeine for 2 weeks, you will be able to stay awake all night if you have enough tyrosine in your brain. And so I said, I'll give you a choice, watermelon or mustard greens. What do you think he chose? Watermelon. And he says it works like a charm. He says he likes it much better than caffeine. Caffeine used to wire him, cause anxiety. Yes, it kept him awake, but he didn't feel good. But he says with tyrosine, it's like the middle of the day. I feel just fine, not a problem, but it's a warning to you. Once you're caffeine free, you don't want to eat watermelon at night. You're going to want to stay up, and you're going to want to not go to bed. And so watermelon is better in the morning or better at lunchtime. Also, another problem with eating it at night is that you're going to have to get up and go to the bathroom more at night because watermelon will definitely cause you to fill that bladder. So the ironic conclusion, don't chow down on high protein sources to boost either tyrosine or tryptophan. Emphasize carbohydrate-rich plant sources of nutrition. Another issue is not enough folate. Folate has been shown to cause depression that medication will not correct. It's called treatment-resistant depression. But folate will correct it. And the U.S. government has targeted folate as being undersupplied in a good section of America. How much do they say you need? 400 micrograms. And that's true. If you're a pregnant woman, you need 400 micrograms. Otherwise, you're going to have spina bifida in your children, or you'll have neural tube defects or other types of issues. But it turns out for mental health, it's better to have 1,000 micrograms. And notice, if you're trying to get it from steak, that's a double serving of steak. You'd have to eat so much steak that you might die that day trying to get your folate. Parsnips, 44 micrograms. Pineapple, 58 micrograms. Orange juice, 75. Peanuts, 88. Mustard greens, 105. Spinach, 109. Navy beans, loaded, 255 micrograms for a cup of navy beans. Okra. Do you guys grow okra here in California, or is that in Oklahoma? Okay. How many of you had never had okra in this group? The majority of hands go up. Wow. Well, I noticed the Tennessee people didn't raise their hands, so Mark has had okra. This Tennessean here has had okra. It grows a lot in Oklahoma. OK Rod, or OK Raw, we call it for cheering for okra, but it's high in folate. I'm surprised, everything grows here in California, so you guys could grow it if you wanted to. Maybe it'd be a good business to do that. But notice lentils. 1 cup of lentils, 831 micrograms. And the highest source, black-eyed peas. There's a Sacramento Valley farmer just south of Sacramento that grows organic black-eyed peas, and we scoop those up and serve them to our Weimar patients to get that high folate level. Atherosclerosis causing heart disease or mini strokes also can cause depression, as can high cholesterol. This is why we measure everyone's cholesterol that comes to our program. Patients with major depression tend to have significantly higher cholesterol levels than healthy adults. Depressed patients with elevated cholesterol have a poorer prognosis for treatment response, and lowering cholesterol levels improves depression and mood and improves what else? Impulsivity. Now, one of the enigmas of the pharmaceutical industry is depression, or I should say antidepressants can improve mood, but before they improve mood, they worsen impulsivity. And that's why they have all black box warnings. What do those black box warnings say? You give this drug to this depressed patient, and it will increase their risk of suicide. What? I'm trying to help them not have suicide. But the drugs actually, a lot of suicides occur the first month someone is put on an antidepressant drug because their impulsivity worsened before their mood improved. And this, of course, is a major issue. We've had some people that are suicidal and have depression, and they'll call us up and say, Dr. Medley, can you do a consult over the phone? Can you give me medicine? And it's like, no, I can give you medicine, but you're going to have to come here to get the medicine, where I look at the whites of your eyes every day to see and make sure that impulsivity, and you're not going to go and commit suicide afterwards. But notice, if you lower the cholesterol, it improves depression, improves mood, and what else does it improve? Your impulsivity. So you actually lower your suicide risk significantly just by lowering the cholesterol. By the way, a statin manufacturing drug showed the same thing. You get them on a statin, it actually works as an antidepressant, and their suicide rates go down. Now, that's not the best way of doing it either, because statins work by decreasing your mitochondrial ability, so you end up with more fatigue. But why not do it naturally and get the cholesterol down naturally and not have to worry about the fatigue issue? So cholesterol in foods. It's not in fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables. The plant-based diet is good here too. Skim milk has 4 milligrams per serving, 2% milk, 18 milligrams. Egg white, 0. Mayonnaise, 8. Ice cream, 29. Butter, 31. But notice the egg yolk, loaded with cholesterol. A lot of people think tuna is part of the plant kingdom and has no cholesterol. But it does have a liver. It produces cholesterol. Clams, 57. Crab, 64. A lot of people think if they scrape the fat and the skin off their chicken, they have cholesterol-free chicken. But it's actually 73 milligrams per serving. Pork, 76. Beef, 80. And if you don't scrape the fat and the skin off your chicken, which most people don't, it actually has more cholesterol than red meat. Oyster, 84 milligrams per 3-ounce serving. Sardines, 120. Shrimp, sorry, it hid behind there, 165. Beef kidney, 329. When you get into the organ meats, it's loaded. Liver, 410. Caviar, 500. If you see anyone feasting on beef brains, you have to wonder about their intentions. 1 3-ounce serving, 1,697 milligrams of cholesterol. Now we know cholesterol in the diet will raise your blood cholesterol, but it's even worse than that because of what Dr. Taylor found out. Dr. Taylor is a pathologist in New York, and the medical students were trying to do a study. You have to do a study to graduate from the Long Island Medical School that was associated with his department. And so those 4 medical students got together and they said, we've got to do something no one else has done. And we looked in the medical literature and no one has ever fed pure cholesterol to rabbits and monkeys. And we got it approved by the committee. We're allowed to serve pure cholesterol to rabbits and monkeys to see what happens to them. And he said, okay, why are you talking to me? And they said, because you're the cholesterol researcher and we thought you might have some. Do you have pure cholesterol? He said, yeah, I've got pure cholesterol. It's been in that bucket a long time, but you can go ahead and serve it to them. So they fed pure cholesterol to rabbits and monkeys. Within a few weeks, they all started to develop heart attacks and strokes. And the medical students were glad their data was done. They could publish the study. But then Dr. Taylor was thinking cholesterol was bad, but it shouldn't have been that bad. He started thinking about the bucket he had given him. It had had the lid exposed. It had become discolored. He thought, maybe it's the oxidized cholesterol. So he then took over a study himself where he fed pure cholesterol that had never been exposed to the air to rabbits and monkeys, and none of them developed any atherosclerosis. So then he realized, okay, people are not just eating non-oxidized cholesterol, they're eating foods. Which foods are the most damaging? And so he fed this food to monkeys, and 24 hours later, he would count the dead cells in their aorta. It doesn't take long for the damage to be done by oxidized cholesterol. The most harmful cholesterol? Custards. What are custards? Milk, eggs, and sugar. When you mix cholesterol up in a sugar environment, you're going to heavily oxidize it. And the most commonly consumed custard is good old-fashioned ice cream. And this is why it's best to eat, if you're going to eat ice cream, eat the ice cream that doesn't come from the cow or come from an animal. They have a number of varieties now that you can choose from. If it's doesn't have cholesterol in it, you don't have to worry about oxidized cholesterol. Second most damaging was pancake mix. By the way, that Brighten Up Breakfast cookbook has 4 pancake recipes with no cholesterol. So you don't run into this oxidized cholesterol issue. It was actually Aunt Jemima's pancakes that they used. And why was that so oxidized in cholesterol? You're powdering up what? You're powdering up egg yolks. Eggs and flour is what this pancake mix is made out of. Third most damaging, Parmesan cheese. You're powdering up the cheese. That was tied with lard with being the third most damaging. But that also explains something else. Does anyone know what the state that has the most heart attacks per capita in 18-year-old males? Wisconsin, Mississippi, I heard. I haven't heard it yet. Someone thinks Tillamook, Oregon, with all the cheese up there. Someone said Texas. It's actually close to Texas. Louisiana, I heard it over there. Louisiana has all that Cajun food. And there's 18-year-olds that come into the ER with heart attacks. Massive heart attacks. That didn't start at 18. That started when they were young. And so in Bogalusa, Louisiana, they did a study on infants, and they found out some infants begin to get the fatty streaks of atherosclerosis. And they're trying to figure out which infants are doing this. The way some mothers eat in Louisiana, the amount of cholesterol in their human breast milk is higher than cow's milk. So they're eating this fast food, this Cajun food, their cholesterol in their breast milk is really loaded. And they thought that's the problem. Which infants do you think had more atherosclerosis? Ones consuming human breast milk in Louisiana or those consuming cow's milk? Okay, I hear a split on that. The answer is cow's milk. The human breast milk, even though they were unhealthy mothers, was not producing damage to the arteries. Why is that the case? They were getting cholesterol directly from the nipple. It wasn't being exposed to the air, and it wasn't oxidized. So the best way for you to drink your cow's milk? Go down to the barn and get it straight. We had a young man come to our program, and he talked to me afterwards. He says, I really like milk, so I'm thinking about what you said. And I said, well, you don't want to get a traumatic brain injury. I would recommend you stay away from that. It was a joke. So, role of antioxidants in generalized anxiety disorder and depression. Patients with anxiety and depression have significantly lower blood levels of antioxidants. After dietary supplementation of these vitamins for a period of 6 weeks, significant reduction in anxiety and depression scores of patients was observed. You might think, why don't we put people on vitamin A, C, and E as soon as they hit the door at Weimar? The reason why we don't is because the power of whole plant foods exceeds that of their component parts. For instance, 1 cup of kale has 50 milligrams of vitamin C and 13 units of vitamin E. Those are very potent antioxidants. But the antioxidant potential of 1 cup of kale is equal to 800 milligrams of vitamin C and 1,100 units of vitamin E. That's why we have them eat the kale and not the A, C, and E vitamins. The Human Nutrition Laboratory took a look at the top 10 antioxidant vegetables commonly consumed in America. Number 10, eggplant. Number 9, corn. Number 8, onion. Number 7, red bell pepper, loaded with antioxidants. Number 6, beets. Beets are a humble vegetable, but they're loaded with antioxidants. Number 5, broccoli. We all had access to that today. I ate that fresh steamed broccoli for those antioxidant vegetables. Number 4, Brussels sprouts, even higher than broccoli. Spinach is even higher yet. And even higher yet, kale that I just mentioned. Anyone want to guess what the number 1 antioxidant vegetable is? It's a vegetable. It is garlic. Not too far away from here is the garlic capital of the world, so it's doing a lot of good to humanity in growing that garlic. The top 10 antioxidant fruits: grapefruit, kiwi, cherries, red grapes, Oranges. This is a humble fruit, but loaded with antioxidants. Plums. And the top four are all in the berry family. Raspberries, strawberries, blackberries. We had those available to us today. And I also saw and ate blueberries that were there as well. The top antioxidant fruit. In fact, it even helps prevent Alzheimer's. Harvard did a study showing 1 bowl of blueberries a week will decrease your risk of Alzheimer's significantly. It takes 2 bowls of strawberries to do the same thing, but those blueberries can do well. Plant-based diets associated with healthy mood states as well. I won't go into those that score, but I am going to just speed it up so we can have some questions and answers. By the way, omega-3, how can we get it? Apart from fish, omega-3 is very healthy for us. I'm just noticing here, this needs to be improved here. So let me just edit my slides. Oh, I didn't realize that you're seeing that. I'm not sure why. It's not my plane. My son, Nathan, wants it to be my plane, so he set it up there as a reminder. This is what we want you to get, Dad. But I actually like the plane I have, so I'm not listening to him. Let's see. There we go. I'm just doing a little editing, and now I can show you my slide. Almonds are high in omega-3. Spinach, higher yet. By the way, if I would have put it more accurately, kale has more omega-3 than spinach. Green soybeans have omega-3. Mature soybeans do not have much omega-3, so another advantage of edamame. Wheat germ, high in omega-3. When you're eating the refined flour, you are not getting omega-3. Black walnuts, English walnuts, higher yet. Chia seeds, higher yet. And the highest source, flaxseed. And so omega-3 is also healthy. Now, for some individuals, they can't make enough of the EPA, which is the antidepressant aspect of omega-3, or the DHA, which is the focus part. And so for some of those, we give them omega-3 from the plants of the waters. And by the way, fish can't make omega-3 either. They get it from the plants of the waters. And that's a far safer place than to get it from fish, because 100% of fish now have mercury in them. So I'll close with Dennis Diderot's proverb, who said, "Doctors are always working to preserve our health and cooks to destroy it, but the latter are often the more successful." It doesn't have to be that way if we retrain the cooks. We retrain the cooks to have healthy food and tasty food. There's no reason to go back to the other way of cooking. And that's why at New Start, there's a cooking school every day. And at Depression and Anxiety Recovery, we have a cooking school as well, so that we can have healthy food that is also tasty. Any questions about what I've presented here today? And it doesn't have to be even about this. If there's any other issues in which you are wanting to ask about regarding WEMAR or other things, then let us know.
This is in regards to protein. And so I have a lot of friends that are into fitness, and they're like, increase your protein, eat all, and a lot of them do it by way of eating meats. And so what is the obsession with protein and bodybuilding or losing weight or changing your body composition?
Yeah, we have a whole chapter in our book, Proof Positive, called The Great Meat and Protein Myth. We actually don't need over 15% of our calories from protein, and you don't need more than 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein. So excess protein has its problems. It kills kidney cells. So a lot of those weightlifters that end up in dialysis units at the age of 50 due to kidney failure. And they might have big upper bodies, but they don't have lower bodies, and they don't have, good, their kidney function is basically gone. It also causes osteoporosis at an earlier age. It also suppresses the immune system. You know, we talked about a little bit about COVID last time. The studies on COVID showed the highest protein eaters had the worst COVID outcomes.
Wow.
If you were on a ketosis diet where it was primarily just meat and you got COVID, you had 3 times the chance of dying compared to someone in the general population. And compared to a plant-based vegetarian, you had 7 times the risk of death compared to a plant-based vegetarian who was eating a lot more carbs. And so protein excess can be an issue. And a lot of these guys don't realize you don't build your muscles by getting too much protein. You build your muscles by working out. And so there's nothing that can replace working out as far as building your muscles if you have adequate protein. Now, you do have to have adequate protein, but even the amount I gave you is more than adequate. And Rose was able to demonstrate this. We emphasize protein too much. All 8 essential amino acids are present in every vegetable. Every vegetable that I showed you, if you eat enough of those vegetables to maintain your weight, you are going to get plenty of protein. All 8 essential amino acids. You don't have to worry about combining. You don't have to worry about supplementing. Even white potatoes. If you eat nothing but white potatoes, all day long you'll get enough protein in those white potatoes to survive and grow and all of that. By the way, when I was explaining that back in the 1990s, back in Ardmore, Oklahoma, based on the research that was done, one of the ladies raised her hand and said, "Now I know why our family survived in the Great Depression." I says, "What do you mean?" She says, "We had nothing but potatoes to eat. And we all thought we were going to die. And the kids grew up normally, and we did fine. And after the Depression was over with, we were so sick of white potatoes that I haven't had a white potato since then." But he says, "I thought it was a miracle of God." I said, "Well, it is a miracle of God because God put all 8 of those essential amino acids in any vegetable. So if that's all we have is one vegetable, we're going to have enough to be able to grow and maintain our weight." So you get into these weightlifting magazines and they act like you've got to have all sorts of extra protein to be successful. It's not true. What's that? Oh, the book is called Proof Positive. Yeah, Proof Positive, The Great Meat and Protein Myth. Yeah. All right, a question here.
I had a quick question. I saw on one of the lists you called out oats. There's so many type of oats. Which ones do you feed in your clinic or serve? And then my second question is, there's a trend, like many, about beef kidney, beef liver pills, or how healthy those are. And now you're saying the total opposite, and the connection to cholesterol.
Yeah. So, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. My son just talked to me the other day, Nathan, who is in charge of our distribution center down there in Texas. And he talked about how people like, Huberman at Stanford is talking about eating organ meats and eating grass-fed beef and just making sure that the meat is healthy and acting like this is a lot more healthier than eating seeds or whatever. And Huberman is not a nutritionist. He is not someone who's kept up with that scientific literature. And organ meats are loaded with both toxins, particularly liver. It's one of the most toxic foods you can have. And yes, you can have all sorts of, liver is loaded with different amino acids and protein, but it's because of their emphasis on protein that they're talking about these things and thinking that somehow we all have a protein shortage. We actually measure all the protein levels when people come into our program. The only ones that are short in protein are the ones with kidney failure who are dumping all this protein in their kidneys. And they had the kidney failure because they ate excessive amounts of protein. And so even thin people, they'll have adequate protein levels in all of those different areas. We're not seeing a problem with protein malnutrition in this country. Now, it's possible you can if you're just eating fruit. We don't recommend you just eat fruit. If you're just eating fruit, you will short yourself in some protein. But if you're eating vegetables and grains and nuts, you're going to get plenty from those states. And, you know, we ought to be able to figure it out. Elephants are the strongest, most muscular animals on the planet. And they can make the weightlifter look like a weakling. And they're only eating plant foods. They're not eating anything else, and they're not supplementing with protein. They're just getting it all from plants. And so, yeah, and they also have tremendous endurance. Elephants can run all night long. They can run miles and miles. You won't see the animal kingdom have endurance when they're eating other animals. The cheetah, if he hasn't caught you in 90 seconds, he's done. He can't run any further. And the same with the leopard and these others that are eating all these animal foods. They can be quick for a few seconds, but that's about it. Where the plant-based eaters out there are going to be able to run and run and run and not stop. Yes.
I have a question regarding osteoporosis. I get anxious because I've been diagnosed with having osteoporosis. I've been exercising 3 days a week and eating plant-based diet and calcium, magnesium, and strontium. And the doctors keep wanting to give me medication and I will not take it. So what options do I have? I don't want to fall and break a bone.
Let me answer that after I answer the oat question, because you asked about oats. Basically, whole oats are good in whatever form. You have steel-cut oats, you have the steel-cut oats we utilize. The ones that are probably the least healthy are your quick, rolled oats. But still, that's pretty good. You can still get whole oats and the rolled oats aspect of things. So I'm not too concerned about which type of oats that you're eating. They have good nutrients, good tyrosine in it. In regards to osteoporosis, there is a vitamin that's very crucial for the bones that's similar to B12, but it doesn't have near the press that B12 has. By the way, vitamin B12 is not made by plants, and it's not made by animals. What is B12 made by? Anyone know? It's made by bacteria. So bacteria, if we have a good microbiome, and it's the only nutrient that is absorbed in the bottom of the small bowel right next to the colon, because God knew that the bacteria were going to make this vitamin for us to absorb it. And so that's where you don't see other vitamins absorbed down there in the terminal ileum like you do B12. But a lot of people's microbiome is off. They've had antibiotics, they've had other issues, and so they can't make enough B12 to absorb it because they have dysbiosis with their microbiome. And so they need B12 in supplemental form. So the reason why it looks like animal food has more B12 is because animal food has more bacteria in it. And so the idea is to not, some people say if you don't wash your fruits and vegetables, you'll get plenty of B12 from the dirt. Well, that's true. But we recommend you still washing your fruits and vegetables. But B12 is a very cheap supplement to take. In fact, we have a B12 that's very healthy. A lot of people are concerned about a B12 supplement because the most common B12 supplement is called cyanocobalamin. Cyanocobalamin has a cyanide molecule in it. It's still very effective, and it's absorbed very well with the cyanide, and it's very cheap, but too much of that can cause cancer, and cyanide can do that. There's a type of B12 that's a very detoxifying B12 that actually absorbs cyanide. It's called hydroxycobalamin, and you can't overdose on that. And that has a lot of health benefits to it. So the B12 we recommend is a chewable hydroxycobalamin. I don't know if Jordan has that out there tonight, but you could look for it. The second, back to your osteoporosis question. The other vitamin that is made by healthy bacteria is called vitamin K2. K1 is made by plants, and we need vegetables and greens to get our K1. But K2 is made by bacteria. And there's a type of K2 called MK4 that's very important for the bones. We have it in a supplement called Peak K2. And if you take 45 milligrams of that per day with food, we did a study in our patients in Oklahoma some years ago, 90% of them will improve in bone mineral density. It will be as good as taking a drug without any of the side effects of the drug. And so I would recommend that. In fact, your dentist will notice a difference within 6 months. Your dental hygienist will say, "What are you doing? Your teeth look so good." Because it also helps the teeth, and it also helps hair. And so for particularly women or men who are losing hair quicker than they want, the K2 will help that hair follicle. And so if we have some dysbiosis or bacteria that are not able to make it, it can make a huge difference. And so I would suggest, based on what you just told me, on what you've already tried, I would suggest you get the K2 and then do a bone density scan 1 year later and see if that doesn't help out a great deal.
Can you purchase it through your company?
Yes, yeah, you can get it through us, yes. Go ahead.
Someone with polycystic kidneys, dialysis 3 times a week, is told that he's not getting enough protein.
Okay. Someone on dialysis 3 times a week is told he's not getting enough protein. So I don't know the particulars of this patient, but I'll just give you some generalities. We used to, in the kidney world, when people had proteinuria, they're getting rid of protein, their kidney should spare it, but when their kidneys are diseased, they can get rid of protein. We used to, when I was in medical school, give these patients more protein, thinking they're losing all this protein, we need to give them more. They would get worse doing that. Then New England Journal of Medicine published a study showing that if we put them on a very low protein diet, the protein levels in their bloodstream go up because it protects their kidneys from dumping that excess protein. And so I don't know about the case in this particular case, whether they need more protein or not, but I can tell you if it's an old school nephrologist that hasn't kept up with it, they might not be telling them the accurate information. We now have nephrologists that are totally plant-based, vegan, recommending for all of their kidney failure patients and dialysis patients. You have to have a special nephrologist to know how to do that. But we do want them to have adequate protein, but not too much.
Thank you.
Yes.
One thing is I wanted to know what you all think about the general recommendations for women to get mammograms every year in general, and just what you all's approach is to cancer in general.
Okay, so in regards to mammograms, it used to be more controversial than it is now because when mammograms first came out, it was quite a bit of radiation. And radiation to the breast can increase breast cancer. And so we were wondering, are we causing more cancers than we're saving cancer deaths by doing the mammogram? But now it's such a low intensity radiation. They have really improved on that equipment. So it's a very low dose of the mammogram. And so now the studies are showing clearly that it's still a very good screening tool to be able to detect breast cancer at an earlier stage. The idea is to get it early enough before it has a chance to spread. And so mammograms in general are a good way to go. Now, of course, an MRI doesn't have any radiation that the x-rays or mammograms do, and that can even be better for screening, but it's a lot more expensive. And so that's why mammograms are not generally done through the MRI aspect of things, but that would be one way of potentially getting around it if you were fearful for the very low amount of radiation. It's essentially the amount of radiation that you're going to get going through a screener at an airport 2 times. And so, and there are some people that are fearful of that they'll allow themselves to be pat down every time. Or, like me, you get your TSA pre-checked so you don't have to go through that x-ray machine. But if they, I travel so much and I'm having to travel internationally, I've gone through that screening, super amount of times. And so if I happen to be randomized, because even in the TSA pre-checked, about 1 out of every 20, they'll light up, and then they'll want you to go through their x-ray equipment. And so I'll just let them pat me down. It's a male, and it's not a big deal to me. And then I'll save myself the radiation. Was there another question? In general, how do we treat cancer? So we're coming out with a new version of Proof Positive. It should be out by the time of General Conference, and we're going to have an entire chapter on the treatment of cancer. And that treatment of cancer is far better when it involves good nutrition and lifestyle principles. There's so much evidence now that, I'll give you an example. And this is one of our long-term goals at WEMAR, is to have a full comprehensive cancer treatment center. But for instance, speaking of breast cancer, since you brought that up, there is a chemotherapy agent. It actually comes from a tree bark. It's called Taxol, but it's still toxic. Chemotherapy drugs are meant to be toxic because they're killing cancer cells. And so Taxol, if you give it to a breast cancer patient that's an aggressive breast cancer patient, it will save 22% of them from developing stage 4 cancer. So 22% is good enough for most people to undergo the treatment. But if you give Taxol plus turmeric, it's now 80% chance they're not going to go. And so the turmeric actually helps to augment as well as protect you from the problems of, or the side effects of chemotherapy. Another thing that's very interesting is that if you fast for 72 hours before chemo, your blood cell counts do not go down with the chemo. So you won't have the low white count, the low platelet count, the low red count. It will protect your good cells. When you go into fasting mode, it protects the good cells, but it doesn't protect the bad cells. And so the chemo does its job, but you have to have, someone to be able to help you. Now, within 90 minutes after that chemo, you can eat again. And so there's certain things like that we bring out that are well documented in the scientific literature that can help people's odds of cancer. And I think, we've had this whole aspect where we have traditional medicine doing its chemo, we have lifestyle centers doing natural treatments, but in reality, it's often best to have a wise combined approach. Even Ellen White did this. Ellen White, got cancer. It was above her eye. And what type of treatment did she get? Radiation. It was called X-ray treatment. She got 11 X-ray treatments. And when she died, it had nothing to do with her cancer. The cancer was in remission. So she underwent modern technology for the elimination of her cancer. And when we use some modern technology that's healthy, and we use good nutritional principles like antioxidants to protect our good cells from the chemo, we can have by far the highest success. But unfortunately, there's not a center in the world that really does that. You either have to go with one or the other, and the world is crying out for a good, wise center to be able to do all of that. But, we need state-of-the-art equipment. Why haven't we done that at WEMAR? Well, WEMAR is a poor place. We have to have, the top radiation equipment. We have to have the top other types of equipment to be able to do that. We need to resurrect our surgery center there, too. There was a surgery center there. And all of that takes funds, and we don't take any government funds. So you can see our limitation on that. We're really at the mercy of donors who believe in what we're doing to be able to go forward and do things like that. But someday, I think it will end up happening. All right, Yes, we have, so I guess I have to take the one with the microphone.
Okay, does isolated protein cause thyroid cancer or thyroid disorders? And what about statins and red yeast rice? And what do you think about the coffees that claim to have mushroom extracts?
Okay, quite a few questions there that can be on the controversial side. So the first one, remind me of the first question.
Isolated soy protein.
Yeah, isolated soy protein. You know, soy has gotten a bad rap in a lot of instances that is totally unfounded. So, you know, by the way, speaking of, well, the person isn't there that asked it about, you know, the meat and all of that aspect of things. They'll act like meat is better than soy, for instance. The Adventist Health Study clearly showed that's not true. They'll really ridicule the meat analogs, for instance. And yes, there's a lot healthier things we can do than meat analogs, but those Adventists that were eating meat analogs had far less cancer than the ones not eating meat analogs and were eating meat. They had less heart disease. They had, and so the soy, concentrated soy protein was still far healthier for them. So isolated soy protein. If we have too much soy, it can cause thyroid disease. There's an association between hypothyroidism and excess soy. However, most people are not eating soy to the excessive amount that it could potentially cause thyroid disease. And for whatever reason, it seems to be present in females, but not in males. So males can get by with eating more soy in regards to their thyroid than females can. As far as a cause of thyroid cancer, doesn't seem to be. It's more the hypothyroidism and the Hashimoto's aspect of things. So the second question, red rice yeast extract versus statins. Red rice yeast extract is a way of decreasing our mitochondrial output in our liver to lower the cholesterol. It's a similar mechanism to statins. And so is red rice yeast healthier than the statins? I think overall it is, as far as it's less liver damage, less rhabdomyolysis or muscle issues, but also a little bit weaker in lowering the cholesterol than some of the more potent statins. And so you'd have to weigh that out. There are other things that we might do, like niacin or even bergamot, which can also help lower the cholesterol where it doesn't have the side effects on the mitochondria. And then the third question.
Was coffees with mushroom extract that's supposed to be beneficial.
Yeah, so mushroom extract. You know, mushrooms, of course, there's a very unhealthy mushrooms that are toxic. We're not talking about those, but we're talking about the healthy mushrooms. Can they actually do some beneficial things? There is some evidence that they can be beneficial in certain areas. However, we're seeing a lot of excess copper in a lot of people these days, particularly because they have a genetic issue to not be able to handle copper well, and mushrooms are one of the things that can have excessive copper. It's kind of like the seafood, and not as bad as seafood, but it can cause an issue, so sometimes we're restricting that in certain individuals.
Due to COVID, I was wondering what your take on the hit that the pharmaceutical industry has been taking because of things that have been exposed.
Yeah, so reviewing the COVID, are you talking about the vaccines?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So a little bit about the COVID vaccines. The COVID vaccines, COVID vaccines that were the most popular were the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, which were giving you the spike protein. The spike protein is what made COVID contagious, and it's what made it lethal. And so the idea was, if we can just have it against antibodies against this, then we can prevent a lot of the complications and the death. So Johnson & Johnson came out with a vaccine that was a typical vaccine that had multiple proteins, including the spike protein. And the more foreign proteins you have introduced, the more chance of autoimmune disease and problems afterwards. And I knew that Johnson & Johnson, the idea is if you have that whole string, you only can have one and done. So Johnson & Johnson was advertising, this is the one that you can have one and done, it's not mRNA, et cetera. But we knew the inflammatory response of that would be worse, and the clotting issues were worse. So Johnson & Johnson ended up having to totally remove their vaccine because the complication rate was even much higher than the others. Now, it turned out the vaccine was an issue the first year it came out. And let me just explain. Of course, I was working in ICU. I was working with COVID patients. And so I was very interested in that first initial study where they said there were 4 patients in the COVID vaccine group that died of unrelated causes to the vaccine. And I wanted to know what they died of. And I found out, I had to dig, they died of heart attacks and strokes. Was that related or unrelated? It was related because COVID is going to cause, whether you get the vaccine or whether you get COVID, you're going to have an inflammatory response. If you already have an unstable plaque in your artery, that unstable plaque is more likely to rupture and cause heart attack and stroke. Hank Aaron got the vaccine because the African Americans weren't wanting to get it in Atlanta, and within a few days he was dead from a massive heart attack. They said it was unrelated. I knew it was related. And this is why Weimar, from the very beginning, if you got on our site, Weimar was preaching, get on New Start before you get the vaccine or before you get COVID. Stabilize your plaques, get on antioxidants, lower that cholesterol, do all of those things. And then, whether you get the vaccine or whether you get COVID, your odds of not ending up in the hospital are far greater. And so we were going into all of those New Start principles. Well, even with the 4 deaths, the COVID vaccine actually did better in preventing hospitalization and complications. And for those of us who are working in hospitals, we all saw it. That first year afterwards, if you didn't get the vaccine, you were far more likely to get admitted and go into ICU and even die than the ones who had gotten the vaccine, if they survived the clotting effects of the vaccine from the first couple of weeks. And since my plaques, I'm sure I didn't have plaques, but if I did have plaques, since I was on the New Start program, they were stabilized. I felt comfortable getting the vaccine. And I did get the vaccine, and I didn't have any issues with the vaccine. And in fact, I got COVID, a patient coughing directly in my face. Before I knew they had COVID, I thought I would come down with it. I never came down with it, and it wasn't an issue. But the COVID vaccine ended up being a moot point after that first year. So it made a big difference the first year, but after the first year, COVID changed, and that COVID spike protein was not the same shape. What does that mean? The COVID vaccine was now helping you. It had to be the same shape. And so eventually they came out with a COVID vaccine with the new shape, but the new shape actually made COVID more contagious but less lethal. And so the Omicron virus essentially was God's vaccine to everybody. It was 1,000 times more contagious than the original COVID. It went everywhere. It was not as lethal, and 90% of Americans have herd immunity to COVID without having to take a vaccine. And so I know Bill Gates, he disappointedly said, sadly, our vaccine did not end the COVID pandemic. But what he didn't add on is God ended the COVID pandemic by producing this morph in the virus to essentially cause herd immunity in everybody and make it more contagious and less lethal. And so that's how the pandemic actually went away. So right now, it doesn't matter whether you got the vaccine or not. It's a moot point. And if you have a very serious disease and you're on the New Start program, you could get the new COVID vaccine. It might prevent you from getting hospitalized. You can still get hospitalized and die from COVID, although it's far less likely than it ever was. And those would be the select cases where I might recommend the vaccine to. But other than that, it's not important anymore. All right, well, we need to, I know we're going late, and so maybe I can answer some questions out there at the table, but let's take one more and then we'll be through.
Thank you.
Or last
Well,
one.
first of all, I just want to thank you for being here. This has been really awesome. And so I do have a few questions, and I'll try to hurry, but these I think, are really important. And maybe you can answer back there, but I think it's so important that we all know how can we access more information about the New Start program? Who would benefit from, because I guess you have two different programs now, the mental health program and then the lifestyle, is it called lifestyle program?
It's called Lifestyle Program or the New Start Program.
And then is there an online, let's say for example, you have high blood pressure and cholesterol and all of that, and you have a medicine cabinet full of all of these different medications. It looks like a pharmacy. And then how do you safely transition maybe to some of the more natural things and combining those? I know I've asked a lot of questions, but just where do you begin, and how do we continue this being able to have more control over our bodies and our health?
Yeah. Well, first of all, newstart.com is a website that you can get on to learn more about the New Start program. And we actually have an online New Start program as well that you can access from newstart.com. But I would recommend, if you are able, even if you're generally healthy, going through the 18-day program is one of the best investments that you can make. You know, a lot of people don't want to go there. It's not all that costly, but they're thinking, well, you know, it's several $1,000s. Have you thought of how many thousands of dollars you'll lose if you die in regards to lack of Social Security benefits? You know, you get Social Security checks every month only when you're alive. And why not spend it now and get a lot more Social Security checks for years on end and make that a good investment, because New Start will actually help you in a lot of different ways. And so in regards to medicine, in regards to, for instance, high blood pressure, we put you on natural things that will significantly help to lower that blood pressure. One of them is going to be beet powder. Another one's going to be flaxseed. 3 tablespoons of flaxseed a day will lower your blood pressure by about 15 points. And so, and then we'll also put you on a lower sodium diet, et cetera. It can make a huge difference in your blood pressure. But we don't lower people's blood pressure medicine until their blood pressure drops to about 105/70 or less. And then we can start dropping those blood pressure medicines. And so we recommend you keep your blood pressure as controlled as possible, then use natural means, and then reward yourself for being successful in the natural means by then stopping the blood pressure medicine. But if you stop the blood pressure medicine prematurely, your blood pressure can go up. It can shrink your brain. It can cause little tiny strokes. It can cause other issues. So we don't want you to dangerously be playing around and allowing that blood pressure to rise up. And so that's the approach that we take in New Start overall. But I would encourage you, no matter what your health issue, or even if you're generally healthy, it's always a great experience. Everyone that comes through New Start, they thoroughly enjoy it, and their biggest complaint is, I should have done this a long time ago. And so take advantage of Weimar and come and see us, and we'd be glad to help you obtain the most amazing health possible in the 11 or 18-day program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Medley. I want to thank you guys for coming. It's been a long day. You've made it to the very end. We're going to give out this gift. I'm going to ask my deacon to help me pass it out. Optimize Your Brain, Maximize Your Intellectual and Emotional Intelligence DVD series with a workbook. So who's it going to go to? Patty.
Cordova Toiv.
Cordova Toiv. Are you here? You got to be here to win, so we'll skip that one. I'll hang on to it if you'd like. Hopefully you pick my name.
Constanza Molina.
Constanza Molina, she's over there in the back. Round of applause for Constanza. Okay, let's stand up and end with prayer. In the back table in the foyer, there are materials from Medley Health and materials that Brother Mark is sharing as well. Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for blessing us with this Friday night and all day today presentations. Lord, we don't just want to be hearers of the word, but by your grace and strength, we want to be doers of the word. So help us to put this into practice and to reap the blessings that come with that. Be with Dr. Medley and his group as they travel home. Keep them safe and be with us as we travel home as well. We commit our lives into your hands for this new week. Guide us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.